This is the beginning. This is not the end. I wanna see it all. See it all. Thank you for allowing me to see you.
Before we get into this, I'm going to be a bit self-indulgent here for just a moment. The response to the last video was pretty friggin' great for this tiny little channel. I just want to let you know that this video isn't a response to that response. I'm not suddenly deciding to focus on the FPS genre exclusively. I just happen to be working on this one at the same time as the last one, simply because the remaster came out when it came out and I wanted to play it. Going back to the response to the last video, I genuinely loved every comment, even those that may not have been entirely positive. LoveableCoolGuy completely lived up to his name and told me what the song in the end credits was. Sure, I probably could have figured it out if I had put a modicum of thought or effort into it, but the fact that he stepped up to the plate was just really cool and lovable. JaggedMercenary said something that has always confused me. It's a sentiment I've seen from people back in 1997 all the way up to today, where Jarek the Gaming Dragon semi-recently said the stupidest thing he has ever said. No hate to Jarek, seriously, I genuinely like his content, and generally agree with his takes on things that aren't the Doom 3 shotgun. You know, every video he makes is a friggin' banger. Like, even the video that this comes from, I love the video. Like, I just seriously no hate to Jarek. Great stuff. Check his stuff out if you're into first-person shooters. He generally has fantastic takes on things. This was just a shit take that betrayed his ignorance on this particular topic. That's all. So here we go. Here's a clip of Jarek being dumb and wrong. The one time I've ever seen him be dumb and wrong. Well, dumb.
By 76%. Unless you're a GoldenEye fan, then oh my lord, you were salty and very surprised and thought everybody was stupid. This one really comes down to what you thought this bracket should be. If you think it should be innovation and how it changed the FPS market of its day, then maybe I can see you voting for GoldenEye. But if you already played PC back when GoldenEye came out, you probably disagree with that. There were plenty of good first-person shooters that were already better than GoldenEye, even at launch of GoldenEye. The only thing they were missing that GoldenEye had was Couch Deathmatch, which doesn't even apply to this bracket. And if you're going by fun value today, boy, GoldenEye does not age well. GoldenEye is a stepping stone to make first-person shooters playable on console. That's its part of history. Everything else can be forgotten. Judging by the comments of this poll, I just pissed off a lot of people. So let's scramble, let's quickly move on.
Of course that's wrong. GoldenEye was the first FPS with region-based damage, otherwise known as the reason headshots are insta-kills in most FPS games, and it was a popular departure from genre standards at the time, which helped prompt the initial shift from Doom clone to FPS as the genre's name before Half-Life came along, and helped fully cement the FPS name in 1998. So for Jarek to not know this about his genre of choice is really disheartening. It's especially strange when you consider what a big Time Splitters fan he is, and it's like, motherfucker, this is the first Time Splitters game. But that's not really the point of this little rant. The point is that I'm confused because every time I hear any kind of criticism from these types, it's never backed up by any examples or explanation. They just say things like the game is bad from a PC perspective, which makes as much sense as saying Pikmin is bad from a PC perspective. Why? Because it has tailored its design to the hardware it's being played on, thus necessitating differences they're not accustomed to? That's not bad, that's just different. But maybe that's not even the issue. Maybe I'm misinterpreting what they mean, but again, that's kind of the point. I don't understand, and I would really like to. You know, I don't think your opinion is invalid, I just don't understand it. That's really what it comes down to. Oh, I should also say no hate to JaggedMercenary for the comment. I was just pointing it out because it was such a sudden nostalgic left hook that left me stunned before the completely unexpected right jab that was Jarek's video almost took me out. What I'm trying to say is that I was left critically injured, fighting for my life in the hospital for months, and they can both expect to hear from my lawyers. Anyway, getting back on topic, Lo Adolfsson 9603, whose name I may be mispronouncing as he's from the parallel universe of Sweden, has also been instrumental in uncovering a potential Danish conspiracy, so we'll keep you updated as the situation develops. Back to you, jackass.
Thanks, dipshit. Early polls show a strong lead for incumbent country captain Vestibule Shrep, shown here enjoying a lovely swim. Shrep is currently missing and presumed dead. Oh, there appears to be breaking news. We go to the field live with first reporter.
The head of SETI will give a full press conference today in the wake of the verified and authentic non-terrestrial transmission coming from just beyond solar system.
Contact with the colony of Mars will be re-established and have nothing to do with the impending arrival of the mysterious aliens.
The McCulloch space station has just been destroyed.
Casualties from the binary retard.
Broken from the main body and then systematically destroyed satellites randomly
Flux in the
and
asteroids.
at will.
This may indicate that
And Tokyo.
Black
And the list of recent devastated cities.
And the UN president gave a conflicting farewell speech as these brave soldiers took the fight to the Strobe's whole planet. We, the rest of humanity, wish them luck and Godspeed as well.
Quake 2 is another 1997 FPS, and I played through the entire remaster and recorded all of it before realizing that I don't think I have nearly as much to say about this game as I did GoldenEye. Maybe it's because my history with GoldenEye is extensive, while my history with Quake 2 just isn't. I didn't play the original Quake on PC when it came out. I played Quake 64, which is not massively different from the PC version, but I didn't finish it. I rented it and Quake 64 2, which is quite different from the PC version, but then didn't really touch the series again until 2021, when I finally decided to play Quake 1 and 2 on PC for realsies this time. And I played them on Nightmare difficulty, which is not me bragging, it's me making a point that these games are really easy if you're even somewhat decent at the old boom shoot, so you should definitely play them exclusively on Nightmare difficulty if you even want anything resembling a challenge. For people new to these types of games, Quake 1 basically skill checks players before the higher difficulties, so just find the most difficult entrance you can actually enter, but if you're starting with Quake 2, just choose the difficulty that sounds the least intimidating and or most fun to you. There's no shame on playing anything less than Nightmare. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying if you want a challenge, you might need to choose Nightmare. Anyway, as soon as I finished both games, the Quake 1 remaster came out, so I replayed Quake 1. Then I bought Quake 1 on Switch and replayed it there, and then I kept playing Quake 1 as they added more add-on campaigns. Suffice to say, I really like Quake 1, much more than Quake 2. I like Quake 2 quite a lot. Like I said, I played through the entire remaster when it came out. I just prefer the style of Quake 1 overall. It's just a little weird and I'm into it. It definitely feels more slapped together than Quake 2, which is understandable when you look at their development histories, but in the interest of not repeating things that Civi already said in his Quake videos, I'm really not going to dive deep into that stuff here. I really just want to take a look at each campaign and talk about how I felt about each one, and then I'll plop them on a tier list because I see other people doing it and they seem to have their lives together, so who knows, maybe it'll work for me. Don't shit on my dreams, let me have this. Each campaign is about a different space marine shooting aliens. None of the space marines are interesting characters, and the whole setup is little more than a framing device to explain why you are shooting the aliens, so we can safely ignore the story. First up, the main campaign starring Bitterman. We start outside our crashed little travel pod with one of the lamest pistols that is still technically useful. It fires really slow projectiles, it feels and sounds weak, and it's just not that fun to use, even though it does still kill the enemies well enough. It's fine, it works, and movement in this game is still really fast and fluid, so even a shitty starter weapon doesn't make the opening bits feel boring. It doesn't take too long to find the shotgun in the first level, which doesn't suffer from the same issues as the pistol. It's not the strongest, punchiest sounding shotgun, but it feels good to use and I like it. The aesthetics of an oppressive alien military base are realized excellently, but they naturally lend themselves to environments that are a little dull and samey looking at times. Their layouts are intuitive enough that I rarely, if ever, got lost, but the levels themselves are not memorably distinct from one another in the same way that the various areas of the Black Mesa facility in Half-Life are. The music is music this time around as opposed to Quake 1's ambient screeching hellscape, which fits the mood of the game but is also just kinda generic and lifeless feeling to me. Overall though, while this is my second time playing Quake 2, my first impressions of being fairly underwhelmed are still resonating with me. What is impressive and shouldn't be overlooked, however, is the enemy damage system. While incredibly simple, Quake 2 was the first FPS to show damage on every enemy model during the fight. As the fight wore on, the enemy textures would swap out to more bloodied and damaged versions, giving the player a visual indicator of the enemy's health. This is especially useful when you're fighting the bigger bullet sponges. Throughout the game are scattered health and armor pickups like in previous id games, but there are also some items that will be added to an inventory and must be manually used by the player. There's a slight stealth element because you can get double damage on enemies that can't see you, but it's so pointless that I'm fairly certain every single Quake 2 player immediately forgets about it as soon as the message disappears from the screen, just like I already have just now. Apart from whatever I was saying, gameplay has largely remained unchanged since Quake 1. In fact, you still activate buttons and switches by brushing up against them. One major change, however, is that you can now freely move back and forth between levels. So after a decent little stretch of shotgunning, we get the machine gun. Sounds great, shoots great, feels great, love it. We do a lot more running and gunning, we meet some doggies, and we find a secret level. Secret levels usually represented an alternate path through the campaign or revolved around a unique gimmick in 90s FPSs, but here it's used as a simple detour through a fun little level with the tram thingy to get the super shotgun. It's good. It's everything a super shotgun should be. Loud, powerful, able to hit things at medium range reliably while being an absolute beast up close. It hits all the standards Doom 2 set. We return back to the level entrance to continue with the previous level, in which we resume whatever the missions in this game are. This game has missions, but I've never read them. They are superfluous window dressing and can safely be ignored in favor of wandering around trying to kill everything until the credits roll. I see a tendency for people to call out things they don't like as bad design, and their arguments often lack greater context beyond their subjective experience. Even good game designers can fall into this trap while trying their hands at looking critically at a genre they are not experts in. Since games are subjective experience, there is often merit to these complaints, but when the complaint at hand is ignoring what the game is for what they want the game to be, it becomes impossible for the game in question to provide any solutions. All of this is just a roundabout way of saying that given Quake 2's boomer shooter focus on fast, free-flowing movement while shooting, the missions being completely ignorable is brilliant. It's almost a flex on how good the level design is that these potential hints are never needed. The flip side is that games such as GoldenEye, where mission text can be vital to figuring out how to proceed, are also brilliant because needing to be more acutely aware of your environment is a big part of the spy experience, and being able to blindly shoot your way to the end would betray that idea. For this reason, I've always been fascinated by games of all genres that sit comfortably on opposite sides of the spectrum from each other, even those I don't find much fun in playing for myself. Back when game rentals were a thing, I eagerly anticipated Gran Turismo 4 on PS2 so I could rent it and try to learn something about simulation-style racing games, the complete opposite end of the racing game spectrum from where I comfortably sat. I didn't have fun playing Gran Turismo 3 at my friend's place a few years prior, and I didn't have fun playing Gran Turismo 4 all weekend in my room, but I enjoyed my time with it because I felt like I was constantly learning to genuinely appreciate something new. I'll probably get more into that particular topic in a later video when we take a look at a racing game, but for now we should get back to Quake 2, which is a very fun game that I like. Chain gun, favorite gun, all the bullets so fast, yes please, okay. Then we shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. I mean, you see the footage, there's not much more here for me to say. I like the weapons and enemies and levels, they're all really good, but none of them particularly stand out from one another. The game becomes a bit of a homogeneous yet delicious slurry that goes down easy and leaves no aftertaste. After several hours of this, we reach the final boss. The only thing left to do is hop in an escape pod, but first a small detour. I think what this game makes me feel can be summed up perfectly by this room. And the best way to explain this room has already been done by Civi in his Quake 2 video.
The other thing that sticks out in my mind of Quake 2, probably more than anything else, is the secret developer's room. It is a cool Easter egg, and I really like it. But there's more here. What was happening at id Software during this, besides the public bitchiness towards Ion Storm and Romero and Daikatana? The story to this, of course, is hinted at in Masters of Doom down to the Easter egg room designed by Tim Willits himself.
Each portrait triggered some type of animation that, in Tim's mind, reflected the personality of the staffer. Carmack's disappeared into the floor when anyone approached.
Carmack had disappeared, locking himself away in coding, and within a year, artist Adrian Carmack, no relation, would want out of id Software, feeling the company was just making the same game over and over again. American McGee and Adrian Carmack would be gone soon enough, McGee getting the same treatment Romero and Tom Hall got for the most part.
For the few devs where something happens when you approach their portraits, it feels off. Portraits explode, or are acidic, or vomit. All of it a trick against the player. It all feels rather hostile and unhappy, and it's especially apparent next to the new additions. This is the remaster dev team's area. This guy explodes into a puppy and two kitties. The effects and overall atmosphere are just a little bit happier, a little bit more passionate about working on Quake 2. Hopefully that means it wasn't a stressful process for them like it was for the original team. Now this isn't to bash the original team, as they still made an amazing game, and they didn't deserve to have a bad time doing it, but you can feel it in the final product. There is a certain soul lacking from this experience when compared to earlier id games. The hollowness of the experience, to me, knocks it down significantly, but the design prowess on display throughout is still so phenomenal that I can't put the main campaign any lower than A tier. But the same cannot be said for the next all-new campaign created by Machine Games for this remaster, Call of the Machine. It's about Bert Kreischer as he haplessly presses buttons aboard a spaceship to deploy other people to do all the work. What we end up with is like a bunch of mini campaigns you can do in the order of your choosing. Given hardware advancements over the past few decades, machine games didn't need to be shy about pushing large, beautiful environments that would have melted GPUs in 1997. Environmental scale is an area that probably none of the other Quake 2 campaigns could have realistically stood a chance at winning, but even in small areas, this campaign looks brilliant in a way none of the other campaigns even try to match. Night Dive's Kex engine's lighting system perfectly complements the classic graphics without overhauling the game's visual identity like the NVIDIA ray tracing demo. This lends itself especially well to the more grandiose and atmospheric areas, which can look truly beautiful in a way the original Quake 2 never does, even with new lighting. Each mission takes us to a different location as a different Space Marine, and while the Space Marines are all identical except for their names, the environments this time around are not. Oftentimes there will be a particular emphasis on a specific color palette to further distinguish different areas that are largely using the same assets. The aesthetic differences aren't massive, still being kept within the limited scope of Quake 2's original visual design, but they are noticeable and very much appreciated. Call of the Machine is hands down the best campaign in this game. The classic Quake 2 gameplay holds up extremely well to this day, but the more modern environmental design sensibilities just elevates Quake 2 to all new heights. I'd consider base Quake 2 a good game that people who need more boom shoot in their veins should play if they haven't already, but Call of the Machine is something I'd consider a must-play for every boom shoot fan regardless of how much else they've got on their plate. It's not just that Call of the Machine is the prettiest campaign, it's that the level design and enemy placement itself is pitch perfect. The level design in base Quake 2 is far from bad, in fact it may be technically flawless, but there's very little of genuine interest for my brain to latch onto when I think about it. Mostly boxy rooms and walkways come to mind. In Call of the Machine, we've got more varied and imaginative arenas, some with fun little gimmicks to change things up, and it makes the entire Strogg homeworld feel more fully realized and real outside the bounds of the game. If these design principles were employed in Quake 2's original campaign, Half-Life still would have been a huge deal in 1998, but maybe it would have been just a little bit less impressive by comparison. Easy S tier. Here, have a little gameplay montage, or skip it if you don't want any more spoilers.
Computer updated.
Next up, in The Reckoning, you're a guy and you fight a bunch of these fucking things. Oh, okay, so yeah, they can jump, they can swim, they have claws, and they spit. They're fine, nothing special, but not annoying to fight. Oh, fuck! Oh, God! Okay, Okay, they're kinda cool. There are new weapons, enemies, and enemy variants, and there's a swampy bit that makes me think of Turok for some reason, but it doesn't feel substantially different from base Quake 2. That's not a bad thing as far as gameplay is concerned. Honestly, I plowed through all of the campaigns one after another because I was having fun. If I had tired of the shoot bang while playing, I would have stopped for a while and come back when I was in the mood again. That's often how I play games. So playing the game was never a chore, as games are often not meant to be, but writing about it now, it's actually hard to come up with what to say. It's brown, gray, red, and it all blends together in my mind. Unlike Call of the Machine, and very much like the base campaign, I remember very little. Keep in mind, I've only completed Call of the Machine once, while I've completed Quake 2 and The Reckoning twice. Perfect example is the trap. Throw it out, it sucks in an enemy and turns them into a health pickup. I love it. It's a great idea that functions well, but I actually forgot it existed until watching my footage. It's a new weapon introduced in The Reckoning alongside the Ion Ripper and the Phalanx Particle Cannon. I remembered the Phalanx, which reappeared in Call of the Machine, but I forgot about the other two, which didn't. Still, it's ultimately not a huge complaint, as it doesn't really affect the game as you're playing it, and there are plenty of minor details about games that I forget all the time. On the other hand, I haven't played Fear in a decade and a half, and I still have vivid memories of its shotgun and its very, very gray environments. But I didn't play Fear in a marathon session of multiple campaigns, which is the only way I've ever completed Quake 2. Either way, I'm putting The Reckoning in B tier just in the interest of being able to explicitly order them from favorite to least favorite. It's not actually worse than the base campaign in any substantial way, it's just shorter and less impressive. Although I am sometimes comparing Quake 2 to other games, these tiers themselves are meant to only encompass Quake 2 and not be compared to other games. A B tier Quake 2 campaign is not necessarily equivalent to a B tier campaign from a different game, and in a tier list of campaigns across multiple games, it would probably be sitting just behind the base campaign in the same tier. Call of the Machine would probably still wind up in S tier unless there were some serious heavy hitters in the arena like Doom Eternal. Spoilers for if I ever do a Doom Eternal video, I fucking love that game. Before we move on, I realized I forgot to check out the tutorial. That's sort of like a campaign. It tutorials nice and fast, teaches you everything you need to know without needless bloat. I got through it in under 2 minutes, it goes in tutorial tier. Ground Zero is another campaign, and it is more Quake 2. The first time I played this was at the end of a Quake 1 and 2 binge, but I didn't bother finishing it the first time because I think I was quaked out, you know, what with the Quake binge and all. And the mounted turrets became increasingly annoying to deal with to the point that I wasn't having fun anymore. This time around, it was only towards the end of a Quake 2 only binge on a shiny new remaster, so I found it much easier to stick with. The turrets are still a pain at times, but I was never bored of playing. However, the turrets are kind of the only thing that stands out in my memory about this campaign, and I still fucking hate them. That and dying to the final boss a bunch, which felt like a complete 180 in difficulty. I didn't have any items to use and barely enough ammo to take care of the hordes of smaller shitheads while also doing enough damage to the insanely spongy boss, so I eventually just gave the fuck up and used God mode so I could see the end of the campaign. To bring things back to GoldenEye for a moment, those have turrets that are in some ways even worse to deal with, but the slower paced gameplay lends itself better to having to sneak around and deal with stuff like that. GoldenEye suffers from failing missions with turrets in them and having to deal with them over and over and over, which can get equally exhausting and unfun as Quake 2's turrets after enough time. Therefore, I'm placing the turrets in Quake 2 and the turrets in GoldenEye both in the C tier. The Ground Zero campaign is going in D tier because both times I tried to play it, I gave up in frustration and annoyance. Finally, we come to Quake 64-2, which uses lower resolution textures to be more in line with the N64 original, and as such, I decided to turn on the old square particles and the CRT filter. I kept everything else the same though, so it's not a perfect recreation of the N64 experience or anything. In keeping with what seemed to be the standard on N64, there are actual colors on display. The colored lighting seems to have been pushed more heavily, kind of like it was in Doom 64, with various blues, purples, and reds highlighting the arenas. It's a nice touch that doesn't completely overshadow the dull industrial nature of the Strogg base, but rather keeps it just visually interesting enough to easily discern where you are at any given time. It does also help that the levels are pretty small and you don't have the backtracking to previous areas like in the main PC campaign, so it helps keep the experience brisk and consistently engaging. It does mean the overall length of the campaign is significantly shorter than the PC game, clocking in at about 4 hours, so this probably wasn't exactly the best bang for your buck back in the day. The smaller levels can also sometimes be a bit on the simplistic side, with stretches of the game feeling like a collection of 1v1 matches against basic enemies down basic hallways, but more often than not, the campaign provides fun encounters and interesting arenas. I really like the campaign. Short and sweet, and it never outstayed its welcome. It was actually a bit of a tough call, but I think I'm gonna put Quake 64-2 in the B tier, knocking The Reckoning down to C tier. I almost put Quake 64-2 in C tier for being so short and basic, but I honestly had more fun with it than anything outside of Call of the Machine. Because of that, I almost put it in A tier, but the base Quake 2 campaign is too good for a few fancy colored lights to surpass it, so B tier it is. hey, I did go back and finish Ground Zero without God Mode after all. That's cool. Still a piece of shit. And with that, we have completed all the campaigns, and there's still one tiny little piece of the game left to explore. In the id Vault is a pile of extra content to check out, and while most of it is just stuff to look at, 2 pieces in the development section are playable demos from E3 and ECTS 97. They're pretty easy, loading you up with weapons and ammo right at the start. They're fairly beefy little demos too, taking me about an hour and a half to complete both of them together. Some of the areas present in the demos are slight variations of areas seen in the base campaigns, while others might be wholly unique to the demos because, as mentioned many times before, this game's environments are a near total blur to me. But none of it feels particularly different from the base campaign, so there's nothing substantially new to see here. Still, it's a fun little chunk of Quake 2 goodness that's interesting to check out if you're curious what journalists in 1997 were playing, and that's it. That's Quake 2, a very fun game that I find ultimately forgettable. While I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels this way about Quake 2, I'm sure I'm not representative of the majority of the Quake fandom. I remember GoldenEye, but I also remember the circumstances surrounding GoldenEye in my life. I have memories attached to it, and it stays forever fresh in my mind. Are those two things intrinsically related? Quake 2 doesn't have that same luxury, and I'm wondering if there are people who aren't speedrunners who can vividly remember the majority of Quake 2. How many of those people have strong memories from their life at that time, and how many have no strong memories from their life but can still remember Quake 2? Are our life experiences and our remembering selves the key to a game remaining fresh in our minds, or is there a quality inherent to memorable games that is independent of our personal experiences? I have no idea, but I'd love to hear what you think. Sure, it helps increase the number being held by the engagement variable in YouTube's algorithm, but I'm genuinely just more interested in what people have to say. Games give me plenty of number get big dopamine, and relying on YouTube to do the same thing is a recipe for unhealthy behavior. So in that spirit, you do whatever you want to do, and your father and I will be proud of you no matter what you decide. Next episode is the first proper Nintendo game covered on this channel. Oh, and I lied before. Your father and I will never be proud of you.